radical, won't you think, for the region? But I know for some of you, you're also thinking about why, with all the challenges that we are facing in the developing country, all eloquently stated yesterday and today about abject poverty, high youth unemployment, somewhat less than optimal education system, stagnant and vulnerable economies, and high debt. Why would we want to think about space exploration? Leave that for the other countries, the US and Canada and Europe. All the reasons that you think that we should not be a part of this is because you are thinking that space exploration is one where we send humans to explore space, or we build probes that go out to other planets and explore our solar system, or we build telescopes that study the origins of the universe. And how could any of those things possibly help us solve the challenges I previously mentioned? But there's one thing you're missing, actually, that space gives us a vantage point, a unique vantage point with which to study our planet, Earth. More importantly, space-based technology, such as satellites, and the data it provides are critical to the sustainability of our region. And that is the context for why this is an appropriate discussion at this forum and for the future of our region. Okay, could we go to the slides, please? Next. So I put this here because in 2012, when Trinidad was celebrating the 50th anniversary of its independence, the multinational corporation Ansa McCall did a time capsule project and invited some of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to contribute to that, and I was so honored to be one of them. And of course, being a space and a rocket scientist, really, my vantage point would be from that perspective. So I said by the year 2062, which we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of Trinidad and Tobago independence, that the leaders of Trinidad and Tobago are thinking critically about the development of a Caribbean Space Agency. But at the time, I was thinking that the next generation would be the ones to develop that program. And what I realized is that someday never comes. And what about now? That all we actually have is now, and now is the time. Next slide. The UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, which has the mandate for supporting and assisting developing countries in using space technology for sustainable development, said this: space science and technology and their applications can contribute more efficiently to the efforts of humankind to promote sustainable development in all countries and regions of the world. They didn't say some countries, they didn't say developed countries, they said all countries and regions of the world. Next slide. So space exploration is no longer the domain of developed countries. In fact, there are 55 nations, about roughly, that are operating satellites. So the developed world is, of course, a part of that. So they develop satellites and they launch it on their indigenous launch vehicles. But there are other countries that develop satellites that try to develop satellites. They're not as successful on launching it and their launch vehicles, but they in fact form partnerships with countries that have been successful, and they procure the satellites and get it launched on other countries' systems. Next slide. So the reason that developing countries would want to use space-based technology for their development is this. You use space-based technology for environmental observation. It has the capability to do weather and climate monitoring for countries in Africa and in the region and where agriculture is a mainstay of the revenue, the gross domestic products. You can use satellites for agricultural management, which assist farmers in crop production. You can also use satellites for oil and mineral exploration, which of course is something that Trinidad is very much familiar with. And you can use it, of course, for telecommunication enhancements. Next slide. With the epidemic we had with Ebola and the scares we had with Ebola here, you can actually use satellites to do health mapping and to map diseases, disease outbreak, epidemics and pandemics in your region. And that can help you with planning of how you combat that outbreak. You can use it for planning and preparedness for natural disasters, hurricanes, volcano eruptions. You can use it to manage water resources for forestry or for you assessing deforestation. And then you can also use it to assess urban growth over time. Next. So for developing countries that go into expanding into the space sector, there are 3 areas of focus. The first is you have to have a space science, technology, and engineering education curriculum, and that's at the tertiary level. But of course, you can't do that without a very solid primary and secondary school education in science and technology. So it takes reinventing your education system at that level and how you approach science and technology. They also develop, at the same time, a capability to do the satellite technology development. And that is going in parallel with your education curriculum. So what they will do is select a cohort of their best and brightest engineers and scientists and send them off to be trained in satellite technology development. And then they look to develop a remote sensing and geographic information system capability, which is something we actually have in this region. The problem is data is never available for our remote sensing experts and geographic information systems because they have to rely on foreign assets to provide that data. Next. In terms of capacity building and human capital development, I talked about this. You get the best and the brightest scientists and engineers that will put their brilliance to work in the most innovative, forward-thinking, and global enhancing ways. You train systems engineers, integrators, industrial engineers, program managers in the methods and process of space mission design. And then these skills of these experts are easily transferable to many other industries. Bevel talked briefly about the area of nanotechnology, microelectronics. If you don't know what that is, just take your smartphone or cell phone out. That's an example of microelectronics. And then micro-manufacturing, which is the process of making microelectronics. Next slide. But this is the real gem for developing countries. It's the potential commercial spin-offs in other sectors, in the areas of biotechnology, robotics. You are able to commercialize Earth imaging that you will get from your satellites. In the areas of telecommunications, you can actually disrupt a monopoly of telecommunication companies and open up a whole avenue for young entrepreneurs to get into that field. In the area of medicine, in terms of getting candidate treatments for diseases and developing novel drugs to combat those diseases in the area of consumer electronics, the entertainment sector, and overall technology. Next slide. So the regional benefit to the citizens are twofold. There's economic growth. You have new job creation, new markets are opened up, increased efficiency and productivity because you are developing a highly skilled, science-literate workforce. You are increasing competition, which is always good for a capitalist society, and sustainability of your region. Also in the quality of lives, those skill sets that you're developing are transferable to developing green technologies, new products that save lives. You can actually save lives by what I talked about, things like being able to predict disasters, improve safety, and then environmental preparedness. Next slide. So the impact on diplomacy, which is germane to what we're talking about today, for sure, the status and sovereignty of the nations are elevated in the international system because space is a big deal. People are inspired by space, and if your nation or region is exploring that sector, you are going to be elevated in the international space. There are new opportunities that will be provided for partnerships with other countries that you may not ordinarily or previously had. And then the prestige that will be brought to the region that's only currently known, this region that's only currently known for tourism, arts, sports, culture, agriculture, and oil. Next slide. So what if we can transform our region from this place being known as fun in the sun? And for someone who's lived in the US for almost 3 decades, I can tell you the perception is the Caribbean is just a place to go have fun, right? What if we can be known for technological advancement? I think a Caribbean space initiative is absolutely a disruptive tool for sustainability and diplomacy. And I'll leave you with this. Last evening, I happened to be sitting in the room. There were some interviews going on with some of our esteemed panelists yesterday, and Dr. Kitui from Kenya and the UN Commission on Trade and Development. The last thing he said to our mistress of ceremonies is, we have to believe in ourselves. And that was music to my ears, because when I speak to young people all over the world, that is what I tell them: believe in yourself. And I know you as parents, you tell your child, believe in themselves, and they can do anything. There's no limit to what they can do. So maybe that is something that we can take on as adults, believe in ourselves. Thank you.